Humans, we interact with them and how we're going to come across them. And then, as art director, I got involved to try to decide, okay, how is this going to look, And in the beginning, Chris always had sort of an idea to pay homage to the Kilrathi from the Wing Commander series. So there was always that in the back of my mind as I started kind of roughing some very quick sketches out, also doing some rough sculptures in Mudbox. So the feline aspect was always there in the back of my mind. Okay, make it feline, but he said he wanted it definitely meaner and sleeker, not as hairy, more alien-esque. So that sort of evolved a little bit, going back and forth just between Chris and I. I know David was involved a little bit as far as seeing something that inspired him to possibly start to change the fiction, or something that Chris and I liked. David would sort of go off on a tangent of, this element that we came up with looks pretty cool. Maybe that can be for this, and then that would in turn come back and inspire the design. So it was a really interesting collaborative process. So it got to the point to where it was always going to be an 8-foot tall creature. I think everybody's happy with that. So we did some tests as far as like showing the work in progress of the creature. And then it always starts with the head, but and sort of goes down to the body. So I think we got the head where we wanted it, and went kind of feline, and went sort of fish-like at one point. A lot of it is trying to figure out what Chris just doesn't like. So as we worked down the body, Chris wanted to make sure that it didn't have just a person in a suit feel. So we took the 5 fingers away, went to 3 long claws. We thinned him up, made him very sleek. The legs are very thin and actually have some openings in them, both in the arms and the legs, to show that it's very unhuman, and definitely a person can't be inside there. And we made the walking motion and the feet a thing called digitigrade, which is basically walking on the toes like an animal, sort of semi that way. So the foot is not really long, but it is definitely up above, and it's not on the ground. So that sort of, once we do things like that, then we have to figure out, okay, let's do some range of motion sort of tests. And since we have a lot of these exoskeleton pieces coming off of him that we all liked, with some shoulder blades and these tubes and horns and stuff, we had to quickly see if they were going to work with all the things that this character is going to do in the game, with fighting and shooting and flying ships, sitting. I originally had spines coming off the hips, which looked really cool and gave a nice balance, but Chris felt that he would be hurting himself constantly, so off they came. And then, so we do some walking tests and some animation movement. Very quickly, I'll rig that up myself before it goes to our animation department. So there won't be a lot of back and forth to make sure everything is working properly and it looks anatomically feasible. And as that's happening, we're sort of finalizing the finished material and the look of the skin, and the paint job on the head and everything, whether it has any hair or fur. And I think we ended up having a little bit of chest hair on the front. We have to be careful not to make it look like some weird macho, Tom Selleck. But I think so far it doesn't. But that'll have to be tweaked once we get into the game engine, and then we can sort of further tweak that to see how the hair reacts in that. Before it goes into the game engine, we're designing costumes and uniforms right now. Another freelance artist is taking care of that. So we have to figure out sort of the military feel and look of these races and these characters, both in civilian type clothing, military type clothing, and within the military, whether they're in space and they need special apparatuses beyond sort of their own evolved body, which has sort of adapted itself over many years of not sort of being on their home world to live in space and to travel great distances in space, as well as sort of being on different planets, environments. So they have, I think, a pretty wide range of breathing different atmospheres, wherever they go. So I think they're ready for any of that stuff. So in addition to their own evolved body, we have to think about that when we're designing the uniforms and the clothing and how they all, mix together without getting too bulky because they're a giant creature. So we're exploring different things right now. It's in kind of an early stage, but it's cool. It'll go sort of like with what we're all thinking the style philosophy of the Vanduul would be. Very spiny, very dangerous looking, dark, hard metals, some interesting sort of tribal shapes. Definitely they have a primitive feel to them, so we don't want to go anything too slick looking, So yeah, should be good.
Hi everybody, I'm here with all of our artists at CIG for a little roundtable discussion. Brian Brewer, Chris Smith, Elijah Wood, Jeff Cabot, Chris Olivia, and Mark Skelton.
Who?
Yeah. So Chris actually heads up the team of artists as our Chief Visual Officer. And right now we're all crunching on the 300i.
Right.
So tell us how the process works for us to deliver come Friday.
Oh, this Friday?
What? How did this happen?
Well, no, it's sort of something that we have to do on a regular basis as far as getting brochures and commercials out to sort of like highlight what the various ships are. So in between the process of like building everything for the game and all the artists like working on the actual assets for the game, we have to sort of like focus on getting the marketing tools out. But it all sort of goes towards finalizing the assets for the game and stuff. We sort of have daily reviews to where we go around and sort of like kind of see where everything is at and sort of make sure that there's a consistent vision and everything. But everybody here is like considered leads, so they're all talented enough to sort of like keep things on a high quality level.
So Brian, what tools do you use, and what's your process for getting your work over to Chris?
Well, I'm generally handed a ship, and I have no idea what I'm going to do because nobody's told me what needs to be done. So I generally work pretty close with Chris Smith here, and he usually highlights everything that needs to articulate on the ship. Some things are very obvious, like doors, but sometimes things that are like control panels in the cockpit, he highlights, hey, these should move this way, things should move that way. Sometimes he blocks in animations, and it's kind of a prototype, which I feed off of, and I go, let's go with that, whatever that idea happens to be. With the 300i, it's been a real learning process for us because a lot of us are still so new in the CryEngine. We're just we're trying to get down the pipeline, how to properly have things built and handed off to animation, how animation needs to set everything up to be properly exported to game. So there's a lot of that. One of the things that I did on the 300i was have to break apart a lot of components. Hydraulics for lifts, tear apart the ladder so it can animate proper. A lot of other games, we may not have that issue because we can rig the ship with a skeleton. But the way the CryEngine handles it is they're animated objects. So that's part of the learning curve. That's part of what has been a real challenge on this initial ship, which we are doing internally from start to finish. So as I figure things out, I play it off of Chris, and we kind of go back and forth, and I say, well, maybe it's a good idea to break something down this way and build it out, and then he takes those notes and he does that for the next ship, and then when he hands it back to me on the next ship, it goes a lot faster.
And a lot of it is like working with the game design department as far as like what's going to be happening on the various ships and stuff, and like what the gameplay is going to be to determine like what needs to be animated.
So basically, we have the concept of the 300i, and then it gets built, and with the concept comes, you know, the stats sheet basically that tells us, what kind of power plant it'll have, how fast it'll be, if it's more like a transporter ship as opposed to a quick speeder type.
And what
All the
tools,
attention.
aside from the CryEngine, who works on the ZBrush? Is that what Chris calls it? Is that you, Skelton?
The ZBrush. Come on, we're in Britain now. Yeah, the ZBrush is an amazing tool. Yeah, I work in ZBrush. It's cool.
What
I
is
think
it?
Chris does too, a little bit.
I do a little bit, like if there's some wear and tear, like for the hard surface stuff, like scratches and stuff.
ZBrush is like sculpting in 3D. It's pretty cool. It's pretty sweet. That's cool. It's very much like 3D clay. So it's like we finally crossed kind of the barrier where you don't have to manipulate polys as much. It's more like a piece of clay in front of you that you can sculpt into what you want. Which, as an artist, I mean, because, you know, I'm not hugely technical. I think having like digital clay is